Welcome to the Champion Circle. I am truly inspired and excited today, as I always am, because we always have amazing individuals that join us. And we are here to tell the stories of individuals that make a difference in our community, that do things above and beyond the call of duty, that inspire, that touch lives, and just make this world a better place. The Champion Circle is dedicated to that, to create a chosen family of special individuals that are magical, that are inspirational, and most importantly, that are blessed. So today, I thank Liga de Justicia Abogados. I thank the Liga de Justicia Foundation for allowing us to come together on this podcast. And this show will be broadcast on ConexcionLatina.com as well as YouTube. So I have the honor, the privilege to have such an amazing individual next to me, none other than Vanessa Baird Streeter. Please welcome her into your homes and into your purview.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, Vanessa. I know it was kind of short notice, but you always step up to any call of duty. So thank you for being here and allowing us to learn a little bit about you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate and finding me worthy to actually be here and have this conversation with you. So much appreciated.
Thank you. So Vanessa, my purpose when I thought about this show was to highlight and spotlight individuals that could inspire others. And so I've always asked our guests to tell a little bit about themselves from the very beginning until current day. So let's start with where you were born. Let's start with, we
going back that far?
Childhood. Yes. Well, it's only a few years. I'm not going to, give away your age.
So for me, I was born in Wyandanch. My parents relocated to Wyandanch from the Bronx, and they were seeking a suburban life. So they came to Wyandanch. I grew up in Wyandanch, born in Bayshore at Southside Hospital, and then grew up in Wyandanch. My mother was very much committed to community service. So therefore, her love was performing arts. So she realized that there was a lack of extracurricular activities for the children within the community. And since dance was something that really inspired her to become an amazing individual, she chose and wanted to impart the knowledge and techniques that she had learned in dance with the youth of the community.
Awesome.
So she created the Vanessa Cultural Workshop in Wyandanch out of our garage. Well, it's either garage or basement, either one. And that was in 1967.
Wow.
And then from there, after the first year, it grew so much that she could no longer house the students in her garage. So then my father, which I don't talk about a lot, but he really was a great support to the work that my mother was engaged in, and also him himself, really community-centric. He reached out to the Catholic Church, which is Our Lady of Miraculous Medal in Wyandanch, and there was born the place that we were for 35 years as the Vanessa Cultural Workshop, and Our Lady of Miraculous Medal Parish Hall serving as our home base.
So let's go back a quick minute, because me being from the Boogie Down Bronx, I want to know, where were your parents from in the Boogie
Prospect Avenue.
Okay.
And then my father was from Kelly Street.
Oh, nice. My neighborhood. Okay, so that's awesome. Now, so you were born at a close time frame to the Vanessa actually
Correct.
Being born and growing and developing. Talk to me about your experience as a young person in school, but also in the Vanessa.
So I think that it was really important for my parents. They're very much, academics, right? And so they always believe that, as much education as we can instill in you and ensure that you have the opportunity to participate in is extremely important. So my mom and my dad, pretty much my dad, always had me in gifted student programs and so forth and so on. I was blessed to be able to attend the Academy of St. Joseph's in Brentwood. So I had the Sisters of St. Joseph really provide my educational foundation since fourth grade, from 4th through 12th grade. And But what was important at the time is that I was always one of a few or the only Black child that was in my classes. And so sometimes you can lose a part of yourself, or you don't grow to understand your rich history, culture, and legacy because you're in an environment that you are the minority. And so the workshop was really important because that allowed for my experiences to come full circle. In the workshop, we learned about African American history and culture. We learned about music that was appropriate for our culture. I learned about James Brown. I learned about James Baldwin, right? I listened to records of Dr. Ben and Malcolm X. So that to me allowed for me to have a wealth of experiences, even though my academic experience was really just me being one of the one or one of a few.
Okay.
And so that was the Vanessa Culture Workshop, I think, for myself as well as many others, really served as that opportunity for us to learn about our history, our culture, our legacy, and our contributions to what we call this mosaic of the United States.
Right. So I was blessed enough to know about Vanessa and go to many of the performances many years ago. And the cultural components were very inspirational, and the young people were just dynamic and highly favored individuals who were getting scholarships, obviously because of Vanessa, and were just leaders, I think, in our community. So I thank you for that work. But tell me a little bit about, because I don't understand the history of Long Island, only being here about 14 years. How was Wyandanch as far as the demographics? Was it a very diverse place? Was it different than it is today?
So I will say that at the time that my parents located to Wyandanch, the demographics of Wyandanch started to change. And so when I think about it, when we talk about redlining and the history of redlining within our communities, you know, my parents had about $10,000 at the time to purchase a home. And so they were shown homes in Wyandanch, which the demographics started to change. However, in the neighboring hamlet of Dix Hills, the house was probably $3,000 more. So they had that $3,000 that they could have purchased a home in Dix Hills, but they weren't shown those homes. So they weren't given that opportunity. Right. And so when we talk about that from the standpoint of family and generational wealth, if you are pigeonholing me into a community that is not going to necessarily be economically progressive, then my real estate value is not going to appreciate like the neighboring hamlet of Dix Hills. So when we're talking about trying to build generational wealth, a lot of times we know that as Americans, our home is our biggest asset.
Correct.
And so not having that opportunity my parents not being afforded that opportunity does kind of put you behind the eight ball, because when you're talking about college, if you don't have the money, you could take out a home equity line on your home if you don't have the money. But if your mortgage is still really high, you don't have that ability for the equity, the appreciation of that asset because of the community or the community that you reside in.
Indeed. Okay, so then you decided to become an Ivy League girl. Tell me a little bit about that.
So the Academy of St. Joseph's, I have to say, great college preparatory school. And so I had desires. And listen, I told you my father had me in all types of gifted student programs and so forth and so on. And they were like, you know, regardless of what you may hear from the naysayers, right? Like you don't have the qualifications, you can't attend. My parents told me that I could. And so therefore, when we were looking at colleges, we pursued and looked at, actually, I wasn't thinking about Dartmouth. So I went to Dartmouth College. I wasn't thinking about Dartmouth. There was a family friend who was also part of the Vanessa. I came home one day from a performance and Herman is sitting in my living room talking to my father. And I'm like, why are you here? And he's like, my father's like, well, he's talking to me about Dartmouth and that you should apply. And I'm like, Herman, talk to me first.
Right.
Like, you can't talk to my father first.
Right.
And so that actually really gave me, opened up my eyes to that opportunity. So I had applied to Dartmouth and Princeton, as well as other colleges and universities. And I was accepted at Dartmouth. And it really was, you have to know yourself when you're kind of engaging or looking at that college experience. And I kind of knew, like, listen, I like to have fun, right? So if I like to have fun, perhaps being in a city is probably not that great for me,
right.
because there's too many distractions.
Like
so Dartmouth provided that rural/suburban environment that was really conducive for me doing well. So that's kind of how I went down that Ivy League path. It was kind of a family friend, as well as my parents telling me, listen, you can achieve anything you want to. You can go to any school that you want to, and you're going to be an asset to those schools. So me believing that, because I needed to believe it when I was engaged in the interviews with the alumni, right? Like I needed to be able to sell myself and how I was going to contribute to this ecosystem of their college, of their college campus. And so I have to say that I'm really happy that I chose Dartmouth. It was a great experience, and I still have friends today that.
And do you go back to reunions?
I have gone back to reunions. I didn't go back to my 35th reunion. I did not go back this past June, but I have friends that are heavily engaged in Dartmouth. I actually just spoke on behalf of one of my friends who was receiving the Dartmouth Alumni Award, and she asked me to be a part of the video, highlighting her as the alumni recipient, and I was able to really speak to her contributions and her influence on me as to why my Dartmouth experience was a great experience.
So many parents assist with that process, but don't really get involved or engaged at the highest level, including my mother, God rest her soul, right? She pushed me the same way you were pushed for education, and that was paramount. But I pretty much did the entire college application process and got the information. So tell me a little bit about your process. How involved were your parents? Did you get engaged with, say, the higher education opportunity programs? What type of scholarships did you find out about, et cetera?
So my parents, like I said, they were academics, so they were going to help me every step of the way. But everybody doesn't necessarily have parents
Correct.
that have that skill set. So I think we also have to think about those community-based organizations that provide those resources as well.
Right.
If your parents can't do it, or you don't have an uncle or aunt or a cousin that can help you, you have to seek out the services, because it's not easy to kind of, that path to applying. It's a little bit easier now with a Common App, right? But that path to applying is not easy, or even knowing where to apply. And so I think that helped to influence the work that I engage in with the Next Culture Workshop. So I sit down and talk to the students. Let's think about, what do you love, right? Because I think in previous generations, it was like, you need to be a doctor, you need to be an attorney, you need to be, and it's like, no. Figure out what you're passionate about, and now let's figure out how we can incorporate that into a career trajectory for you. So that's really what I do with my students. I did that with my son as well. And take the opportunity to talk to them, figure out what schools you want to go to. Listen, transferring, you don't really want to do that. You might lose credits. So let's think about really where you want to go,
right,
and then let's pursue. But then at the same time, I tell my students, think about where you want to go. And same thing with my parents. They didn't necessarily have all of the money to be able to send me to an Ivy League institution, but it was like, apply, see if you can get in, and then we can figure it out, right? So you can figure it out a lot of times with financial aid. Many of these institutions, if you make under a certain threshold, you can go for free.
Right.
Even with our SUNY schools, if you make under a certain threshold, you can go for a free or very reduced cost. So you want to keep that in mind, but don't allow that money to be the barrier of you applying. Apply first, and then there's boundless opportunities of scholarships. But you really have to seek them out, and you have to search. And that's where those community-based organizations come into play, because a lot of them have a variety of different scholarships that they can support. So I receive scholarships from $100 to $5,000. So you take that opportunity really to explore, but it really is a concentrated effort, and it's not just for your senior year. You should be thinking about this college experience probably from the 9th grade forward.
Right.
So that you can best prepare,
right,
and it's not going to be so much of a burden the senior year when you have to actually engage in the applications.
Indeed. So what was your degree in?
So my degree was in economics. So I wanted to pursue finance. So I realized that about 15, my father was reading a Smart Money magazine, and he says his nickname for me was Stuffus, because I used to be a little chunky when I was born.
Oh, wait a minute. Repeat that, please.
I was a little chunky when I was born. The doctor said I looked like a sausage.
The nickname was what?
Stuffus.
Okay.
Stuffus.
Right.
So he was like, Vanessa, you're great in math. So he tried to think about, what are you good in, and then let's figure out a career path for that. So he said, you're great in math, and look at this career as a financial analyst. Read about it and see if that's something that interests you. So at 15, I took the opportunity to read the Smart Money magazine article about financial analysts and figured, okay, that's something that I could pursue. So that's kind of how I chose my career. But At Dartmouth, it's a liberal arts institution, so you don't have the ability to major in finance. You will major in economics, and that will kind of give you a liberal arts exposure to everything with finance under that auspice. And then my mother said, okay, economics is great, but what happens if there's a depression or something happens on Wall Street? So what's your backup?
Right.
So then it was like, okay, well then I'll consider education. So it was a double major in economics and education. Okay. So I had that as an opportunity to fall back on if the markets happen to, collapse.
And with the double major, you were still able to graduate on time?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so there was really no option to not graduate on time. My parents told me, we pay for 4 years.
Right.
Anything over the 4 years is on you.
Right.
So I had to do everything possible to make sure that I made it within those 4 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So next chapter, you seek employment. Talk to us about that.
So in finance, right, the highest position really in finance at that time was a financial analyst at an investment bank. So I started pursuing and looking at that probably sophomore, junior year. I actually had an internship my sophomore year with Bear Stearns. So at that point in time, I was in like government operations. And then after that, Prudential Securities. And internships are extremely important as well. So the more opportunity that you have to be in the corporate field or in any field, it helps you to figure out, is this something you want to pursue? So I was fortunate enough to have 2 internships as well as be a part of Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, which is called SEO. So not only do they help to provide you and connect you with the internships, but it's also a lot of coaching and teaching and leadership development that takes place at the same time. And so I pursued financial analyst. And then really as a financial analyst, you have to work for one of the investment banks. So I had the opportunity to really interview. As you can tell, I like to talk. I'm a little verbose.
No.
So I think that works well in the interviewing space.
Right.
And so I interviewed with Goldman Sachs, Payne Weber, Shearson Lehman, Bear Stearns, and one other that I can't think of right now. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough, and Merrill Lynch. And I was fortunate enough to receive offers from 4 of the 5. Merrill did not give me an offer. So I was fortunate enough to receive offers from the 4 of the 5 investment banks, the large investment banks at that time. And I chose Goldman Sachs because Goldman Sachs was really considered the premier investment bank.
Right.
So I was fortunate enough to be able to have that opportunity and really get to travel the United States and the world as it pertains to and it was a variety of different projects. So I could be working on a mergers and acquisitions deal where we're merging or acquiring another company. Mm-hmm. I could be working on a tender offer for debt. Mm-hmm. I could be working on common stock offering. And so I had a multitude, and I was a generalist. So I could work on a variety of different projects. But it was a great experience. You're going to work 80 to 90 hours a week, but you're 21 years old. So what else do you have to do?
So what kind of I'm imagining that Dartmouth was not as diverse as we would like it to be, right? And I would imagine that Goldman Sachs was probably the same, if not maybe even less diversity. What kind of support groups did you have, and did you seek out or search out for while at Dartmouth and then subsequently at Goldman Sachs?
So while the Dartmouth population or the student body wasn't necessarily had large numbers of African Americans particularly represented, it was a very close-knit group. So I learned a lot more about my culture, history, and heritage at Dartmouth than I think I might have learned at other institutions. So we needed to be close-knit because we were probably working with 300-400 students. So we needed to be close-knit. We needed to be able to support each other. So I really found my support within my Dartmouth community. And everybody there were leaders. They were socially justice, inclined.
Right.
While I was there, I participated in, protests in reference to divestment out of South Africa.
Right. Okay.
My parents didn't know. My mother was like, Vanessa, you get financial aid. You shouldn't participate. And I'm like, no, I'm not participating. Meanwhile, I'm calling her from like my sit-in.
Right.
But it was really because the community was so small that we were a great support network to everybody, to each other.
Right.
So that was great. And then realized that the common trend through all of this, while I was at Dartmouth, while I'm in investment banking, is I still had the Venettes.
Right.
So I always came back to teach. I still had that support network of the teachers, the mentors, the students. So that always kept us, that kept me grounded, right? Like I might be dealing with individuals or corporations that are worth billions of dollars, but then on Saturday and Friday, I'm teaching students who, may be on public benefit programs. And so it kind of normalizes some of the experiences that you might have. And it also shows you the importance of making sure that you're giving back to community and helping to uplift the next generation as well.
So then you decide to leave the financial industry. Why? And where'd you go?
So I didn't really decide to leave, okay? Didn't decide.
Okay.
So after investment banking, then I worked for a small boutique firm as a portfolio analyst and bond trader. And I loved that as well. And then my pastor at my church, which was Our Lady of Miraculous Medal, says, Vanessa, there's an opening for the director of the Ministry to Catholics of African Ancestry at the diocese, and I think you'd be great for it. And I was like, the average age in that building is like 55.
Right.
I'm like 30. I don't know if that's going to work. And he's like, no, but Vanessa, it's the same passion that you have with the workshop and with the kids. It's the same passion that's needed here. So I'll be honest, I didn't willingly accept, but really what it was is if God is calling, it's your pastor asking you, how can you say no?
Right.
So, and I always have believed I believe that the Lord leads and guides my steps each and every day. So if this was coming into my purview, then it should be something that I should explore.
Okay.
So that's really, it wasn't necessarily so willingly looking for something else. It was really it being brought to me and then saying, okay, you know what? Now it might be time to try to change it up a little.
Right. So often God, laughs at us when we make plans. He laughs, right? And he pushes us towards his plan.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that's blessed.
Exactly.
So talk to us a little bit about your responsibilities in that role.
Sure. So the Ministry to Catholics of African Ancestry was really responsible. At that time, there were about 30,000 Black Catholics on Long Island. But the Black Catholic experience on Long Island is a little bit different than D.C., than St. Augustine, Florida, because we don't have necessarily area or churches that all Black people belong to. So Black people are kind of rooted in the tradition of singing, song, dance. The homilies or the sermons, right? In Catholic Church, it's a homily, but the sermon is related to our life experience. And that's not necessarily something that we were experiencing in the churches within the Diocese of Rockville Center. So I kind of wanted to ensure that need that we have for spirituality and connectedness, that I was able to bring that to the position. So we had revivals within the Catholic Church. People are like, wait, the Catholic Church is having a revival? I'm like, oh, yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
So we had revivals, 3-day revivals in the Catholic Church. I brought in pastors and priests from other areas. They were twins in Indianapolis that were amazing pastors and preachers. There were some preachers and all Catholic, some preachers in New York City, brought them in so that the Black Catholics on Long Island could have that similar experience that we had coming from the continent of Africa, or even coming up through our slavery experiences. So, and just because you wanted to keep people within the Catholic faith, you didn't want them going and searching somewhere else, we could fulfill that need, but we just needed the right people to fulfill that need, the right leadership within the Catholic Church to fulfill that need. So I have to say, I came to the Diocese of Rockville Center at the time. Bishop McGann was leading the effort, and Bishop McGann was just an amazing leader of the diocese.
Right.
And so the things that I wanted to do, he didn't necessarily say no to.
Right.
So, and then he would participate. So that showed the Catholic faithful that he believed in making sure that everybody felt comfortable within the Catholic Church. So I was in that position for about 7 years, and it was a great experience.
So once again, in your career or in your life, an opportunity comes that you didn't necessarily plan for or seek out.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
You just have to be, if you are a faithful person, you have to know that the Lord is going to not really steer you wrong, right? And you may not understand it at the time, but that's the point of faith, right? Faith is believing without seeing.
Indeed.
So we have the faith that he's not going to steer us wrong, and we just take on that path, and he has never steered me wrong.
Right.
He really hasn't. So I'm going to give the example from, I was at the diocese for 7 years, and then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do something else. But didn't really know. I knew that I wanted to engage in communications because I had been on Telecare, their television station, probably 20 times and really enjoyed it, but didn't have a background or a degree in communications.
So maybe we should start a podcast for you as well.
Well, no, that's okay. I'll leave that to you. You're good. I could be a guest and we'll be okay. And so I said, and I said to the Lord, I was like, I would love to go into communications, but I don't really know how to segue from the work that I'm engaged in the diocese to communications. So then I go and meet at the time the then supervisor of the town of Babylon, which is Steve Ballone, and I go to talk to him about the Vanessa Cultural Workshop, trying to secure a home or some land so that we can build our own building. And the next day he offers me a job as the director of communications. And I'm like, I literally looked up and was like, you're awesome like that? Like, literally, it was probably a 2-3 month time frame, and then that came to fruition.
So repeat that. It was the very next day. Is that correct?
Correct. Okay. That I went to meet with the supervisor at the time of the town of Babylon, which was Steve Ballone. I was meeting with him about the organization that I run, not about the job that I have.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to seek out a job. And the next day he calls me and says, I would like you to serve as my director of communications. And I said, well, I don't really have communications background or experience. He goes, oh, yes, you do. He said, the passion that you spoke to me about your organization is the same passion that you need when you're communicating policies and initiatives to community members. It's the same passion that I need as part of my team to make sure that, we're doing the right thing by community and for community.
Right.
So I would like you to come on to the team.
Awesome.
And so that's how I was able to segue into communications without having communications background, but having faith in God that he was going to lead and guide those steps.
Okay. And how long did you stay in that role?
I stayed in that role from 2005 to 2009.
Okay.
And it goes to show you also to, it's important to network and have strong relationships. So I was in that role and wasn't looking to leave. However, Matt Cohen was working at that time. He's the president and CEO of the LIA, the Long Island Association. But at that time, he was working for Schumer's office. And so he left Schumer's office to go work for the Long Island Power Authority. And we had formulated a good relationship while I worked at the town. And when he was leaving, I was like, Matt, make sure you take time. Like, everybody leaves one job and goes straight to the next job. You need to take a couple of weeks because you need to kind of revive yourself. And you also can't really take time when you start a new job. So he's like, oh, I don't know, whatever. So I got him to take maybe like a week.
Okay.
But he's at the Long Island Power Authority. And then they're looking for a vice president of communications. And then he reaches out to me and says, Vanessa, would you consider, serving as the vice president or the executive director of communications for the Long Island Power Authority? So that really was only a work relationship that we had. But he thought about me and said, well, I think you would be good at this position as well. So I had the opportunity to interview.
Now, if I remember correctly, LIPA didn't necessarily have such a great brand and reputation. So how was that, dealing with a job like that was so challenging and trying to communicate in a productive and effective manner?
Well, I will tell you that at first I was like, so I'm going to be charged with changing the public sentiment about the monopoly, which is Long Island Power Authority.
Right.
I'm like, that's like an uphill battle. I don't know if that's one you're going to win, right? But being transparent with the community, letting them know the opportunities that exist, the resources that exist, and just really being available. So I'll say to you that we had Irene, which was a precursor to Sandy. And so during Irene, we probably had about 600 to 700,000 customers out, without electric. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, during that period of about 7 or 8 days, I did about 326 interviews.
Wow.
Whether it was radio, TV, so forth and so on, because we didn't have the communication tools to be able to really permeate the message to our community members.
Right.
So therefore, I was like 4 o'clock in the morning, I might have been doing an interview. But I wanted to make sure and make that commitment to people to let them know, these are the estimated restoration times. Mm-hmm. This is how you should prepare. This is what you should prepare for. So I think in every position I go above and beyond, but that's really because it's about service to community and making sure that community members have information at their fingertips and have the resources available. So it was an uphill battle, but I have to say that each job that I've had has built a skill set in me to prepare for the next job that I don't know is coming, but he knows is coming.
Right.
So it helps me build that skill set and hone that skill set.
So at what point did you now jump into the family responsibilities and getting married and having a child and all of that?
So I didn't really talk about that. That happened a while ago. I've been married 32 years.
Okay, congratulations.
So I was still in finance, and my husband happened to be in finance at the same time. So I met him while I was interning at Bear Stearns.
Okay.
So I talked about interning. He was working there. And so I met him at that point in time. We got married in 1992. But that was also the same time that my mother took ill. So she had terminal cancer. And really what he was able to show me through that time frame is I was able to see Jesus in his actions.
Wow.
And so I say that because I'm working in finance, so I'm working, ridiculous 60, 80 hours a week. And really on the weekends, while I would teach dance on Saturday, on Sunday I'd have to go into work. But I needed somebody to do like the food shopping, the laundry, so forth. And he's like, I'll come out and do it.
Okay.
And he would spend time with my mother, go out and do the food shopping. And she wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of his either. And he would still do it. Wow, so that's why I say that's the Jesus in you, right? Like I see that in you. And so that really kind of sealed the deal for me that this is the person that I should choose to spend the rest of my life with.
That's amazing.
And he is a very spiritual person as well. So he even heightened and deepened my spiritual experience and spiritual journey because of, being one of 12. He's one of 12 brothers and sisters. But they, his parents ensured that they were in church on a consistent basis and, ensured that they had a really solid spiritual foundation. And that is something that he brings and leads, brings to me as an individual and helps to lead our family on our spiritual journey.
Okay. So there's so many extraordinary women that we see every day. And the balance issue is always a big one, right? Because obviously our women are so extraordinary that they really want to deliver at the highest level in every part, every phase of their life, right? So where would you say your challenges of life balance and balancing your son and your husband and your family life were with you, throughout your career, and what advice would you have for them?
So, it is difficult, right? It's difficult because not only did I have a career, but I also had, a performing arts organization that I run in addition to my day job. So being out of the house a lot, yes, I'm out of the house a lot, but that also allowed for my spouse to say, I support you in this effort. So he picks up the slack where I might not be able to give 110% of myself. So I have to say, like, the relationship that he has with my son is amazing, right? Because they spent a lot of time together, but also didn't give me like really a hard time about it. But my son also understands what mommy was doing. So I would come home and talk to him about whether it's work-related, a press conference that we're engaged in. I would engage him in my work. So he's learning through that as well. So, I'm not going to say that I was able to master the balance because I definitely wasn't. There were many times that I wasn't present in the home and my husband had to pick up the slack. But at the same time, I think he also knew my commitment to the community, and sometimes, one has to outweigh the other. I know you got home, so let me go and try to do what I can to uplift community. Okay. However, when I'm giving advice to others, I'm always telling them don't take on too much, especially extracurricular outside of your job. Like, don't do it, because I know what that experience was for me, and I know how I felt when I couldn't go to my son's basketball game or I couldn't go to his football game. He understood, but at the same time, I didn't like the feeling. Right. So I really do encourage when I serve as a mentor to others or I'm providing advice, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this twice a week. And then I'm like, nope, you're going to change that to once a week. You do that once a week so that you have that time to dedicate to your family. Okay. So I try to teach people through the lessons that I have learned that, might not have panned out so well for me, but I try to impart some knowledge that I didn't necessarily take on or advice that I didn't take on as well.
So many people know you because of your government roles and your titles. Tell us about that chapter.
So I had a relationship already established with supervisor then Ballone, Steve Ballone, and then I was working at LIPA and he won the seat for county executive and reached out and said, would you consider coming on board? I still had to interview, so that wasn't a given. I interviewed with his transition team and I was given the opportunity to serve as the director of communications. And I found out from my time working in government, in the town government, I realized like how important government is. We don't realize it, right? But that affects your quality of life on a consistent basis. Right. So, when there was an opportunity to go to the county, I was like, you know what, Vanessa, take the opportunity to go to the county. You'll help to influence. You'll help to be a voice for people who may not have had a voice or a seat at the table. And so I served as director of communication, and that was really helpful because as director of communication, you interact with every department of the county, right? So I'm going to interact with the commissioner of Department of Public Works. I'm going to interact with the commissioner of Health. I'm going to interact with the commissioner of Social Services. So I'm going to learn about all of those departments, which is helpful as I'm communicating something to the public. But it also just helps me understand government that much better. So I was the director of communications, then I became an assistant deputy county executive, and then became a deputy county executive. And I have to say, at the time that I became a deputy county executive, that was at the height of the COVID, our COVID experience.
Yes, I remember.
And it was so important to ensure that you had people in government that represented diverse experiences, diverse thought process and mindset, to ensure that those who were being disproportionately affected by
Correct.
COVID were getting the resources that they needed. You know, we talk about equality and equity. There's a difference between the two. Equity is extremely important because that means that I may give a little bit more to you because you don't have, right? Versus everyone being equal. So being at the helm of government at that time, I was able to create hotspot testing sites in communities that were disproportionately affected by COVID, so to make sure that people had free access to testing, so that if you were COVID positive, we could figure out what to do to ensure the health and safety of your family members. I was able to work with a myriad of nonprofits in making sure that we can provide food, and we could provide clothing, and we could provide resources, right? Also making sure that this was something that was unprecedented that we had never experienced. So making sure that language access was at the foundation of this, because we serve a very diverse group of people. And if we're only communicating in English, there is a large subset of the population that's never going to know or have access to the resources that we have. So making sure that we were translating and interpreting in different languages. And then when it came time for the vaccine, to ensure that there was equitable distribution of the vaccine, and particularly to the communities that were disproportionately affected originally.
Correct.
So I was able to do that, but at the same time, also leading the effort in the county of police reform and reinvention.
Right. So I want to personally thank you, because you were an inspiration to me during that time. While you were in that role, I took over at Pronto, and you were such an amazing partner to assist and to help those people that were disproportionately affected. So many of our clients were living sometimes, 8 to 10 people in a home, and could not.
Right. Couldn't isolate.
Could not
right?
isolate by any means,
Correct.
right? And so that disproportion had to be addressed appropriately, and you and the entire administration did what I thought was a stellar job. So I thank you for that.
I'm very just blessed. And, even after leaving the county and, some trials and tribulations that have existed after leaving the county, I would never change the experience, or I would never change the opportunity to work for the county.
Right.
Because you can create and implement policy that is beneficial for all residents of Suffolk County, not just a particular subset of residents. And so that really comes from the leadership. So County Executive Balone was an amazing leader that believed in his senior staff. So gave us the ability to be able to create programs and policies that were needed to make sure that we serve everyone within our community. So, kudos to him for just being an excellent shepherd of the county, but then also just to our senior staff that was committed. And during COVID, we literally worked like 18, 20 hours a day.
Right.
But you didn't feel it because you knew that what the work that you were doing was helping to save lives.
It saved lives.
And so
for sure.
That's really where I
and
said
people
if I have
depended upon you.
And I was like, if I could do it, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it the same way.
No, God bless. Yeah. So now that's winding down because of term limits, and obviously something's going to change for you.
Right.
So tell me what your plan was, and tell me what actually happened.
So I'll be honest, like everyone, the year starting our last year, right? So the beginning of January 2023, everybody starts talking to you like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And I'm like, I got a lot of work to do with the county. Like, I can't really think about that at this point in time. I was engaged in a disparity study. So the disparity study is really to analyze the utilization and the availability of minority and women-owned businesses within the county, and to find out, is there a disparity? If there is a disparity, then you can implement an MWBE program. So that was really my goal, to ensure that I completed that before I left the county.
Okay.
So it was really hard to really focus on anything else outside of that. And I just kind of really felt, once again, that the Lord is going to make sure that he's taken care of. Right. He takes care of babies and fools, and I fall in one of those categories. It's the baby category. No, I'm just kidding. It's the fool category. But I fall in one of those categories. So I really probably, in the November timeframe, started thinking about what I could do. And I knew that the disparity study was wrapping up and I was going to be able to have a final report to release so that we knew the underutilization of MWBEs and service disabled veteran-owned businesses. And I wanted to leave the next administration with a foundation and a template to be able to move forward. So I'll be honest, I really did not spend a lot of time thinking about myself. I kind of wanted to think about what was the environment that we could leave for the next administration for them to build upon.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you often gave advice to people to take some time in between positions.
Yes.
Did you have that plan?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So that advice is something that I'm going to definitely hold to. And, being at the county for 12 years, we really did work a lot, right? Like, so people would be like, how come you don't go to this event? Because I'm working. So I knew that I wanted to take a month off before I started my next position. And I was able, the plan was to take a month off.
Okay,
right?
so let's get into those details.
The plan was to take a month off and start February 5th. However, at the Health and Welfare Council, of which I am the president and CEO now, there was an opportunity for us to respond to a request for applications for us to become the social care network for Long Island. And so that application came out we knew the application was coming out in the beginning of January. So I was like, okay, I know I don't start working until February. I won't go into the office, but I'll have at least 2 to 3 meetings per week so I can be up to speed. I don't want to be behind the 8 ball and be, not contributing to this process of being able to apply. So, so I took the time, but didn't really take the time. But at least I was home.
Right.
I was home.
Right.
So
that agency is one that I partnered with in the past when Rebecca was there, and they do such amazing work. Tell us about the Health and Welfare Council, the services you offer, how you collaborate, who you partner with.
Great. So I am fortunate and blessed to be at the helm of the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island. And when people think about it, they hear council and they're thinking that it's like, 10 people that are kind of sitting on a board. But it isn't. We engage in direct service, and whether that is assisting community residents with SNAP applications, so that's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, not only just telling people about it, but actually doing the pre-screening to let people know, are you eligible for it? The worst thing is to complete an application thinking that you're going to be eligible for something, but you really don't meet the eligibility requirements. So pre-screening, and then after pre-screening, actually helping clients complete the application, because what that does is if the application is completed and completed correctly, that reduces the time frame for the local Department of Social Service to approve the application. So it's not like a going back and forth with the client because they don't have the right documents uploaded and that sort of thing. We actually do that ahead of time so that we can reduce the wait time for clients. We also engage in health insurance enrollment. So that is the New York State Marketplace, making sure that people are aware that the New York State Marketplace exists, and that's really an outcome of the Affordable Care Act under President Obama. But the fact of the matter that there's opportunities that exist for people to get affordable, quality health care at reduced cost, people are just not aware that it exists. So I'm going to give the example of my son. My son is 26, so when he turned 26, he was no longer able to be on our health insurance. And so he works, but he's a freelancer. So he's like an independent contractor for CBS Sports. So I was like, okay, you need to call one of the people at my job to figure out how you get health insurance. He's like, I don't really need. Oh, yes, you do. Because if something happens to you, we're not footing the bill.
Correct.
So you need health insurance. And so he calls our health navigator. They walk him through all of the options. And really, for $310 a month, he's able to have like superior health insurance based on what his, annual salary is. And people don't necessarily realize that opportunity exists. So we do education about that. We sign people up. We deal with the aged, blind, and disabled as well. We also work with people with medical debt. So that's our community health advocates. So some people have an astronomical amount of medical debt, and that's precluding them from going to the doctor because they owe so much money. And so there are programs out there that people are not privy to or not aware of. So we work with individuals. This one individual had about $38,000 of medical debt, and we were able to bring that down to $4,000. And so now that person is now going back to the doctor, because that's not helpful if you're not going to the doctor and taking care of yourself. So We have the SNAP side, we have the health enrollment and insurance side, and then also we are an advocacy organization for about the 200 nonprofits on Long Island. So we coalesce around particular issues that are pertinent to all of us, and we'll lobby the state, federal government as it pertains to those particular issues. We work collaboratively with a majority of nonprofits on Long Island, just making sure that we're really meeting the needs of our constituents.
That's awesome. Yeah. What initiatives are going on right now that you're kind of spearheading?
So when I came into the organization, there was a report that was released by New York State from the Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Task Force of New York State. And that really focused on the disproportionate deaths that are associated, during childbirth, particularly with Black women.
Right.
And so Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth or have complications during childbirth. Right. And we're in a country that has superior health insurance, right? So how could that possibly happen, right? We have, I'm sorry, not superior health insurance, but superior health care.
Correct.
Right? So how could that happen? And so after the report came out, I just said, this is something that I really want to focus on with the Health and Welfare Council. I want to address that disparity. And we want to do it from 3 different prongs. It's about education and empowerment of the birthing parent, because they need to advocate for themselves. A lot of times when you're sitting at the doctor's using words and terminology that you don't understand. So you're not really telling the doctor what you're truly feeling or what you might be experiencing. That's one part of it. 2 is really looking at the other opportunities for birth workers. So there are doulas and midwives that studies have shown if you have a doula or a midwife that's part of your birthing journey and birthing plan, you have better outcomes.
Right.
So making sure that there's accessibility to doulas, and Medicaid at the beginning of January of 2024 started reimbursing for doula services. So making sure that the communities know and residents know that that's an option for you. And then also working with our hospital systems and healthcare systems to ensure that there isn't bias that is taking place, and then looking at what the best practices are that have good outcomes as it pertains to birthing outcomes, and then sharing that with other healthcare institutions within the region to ensure that we're all going to be part and parcel and contributing to ensuring that we're going to change this disproportionality as it pertains to birthing outcomes for Black women.
I consider myself somewhat informed, and I was shocked when I read that data and understood
Right.
the dynamics of something that you would envision being in another country, right? So-called third world countries, right, or what have you, right? And to see that happening in Long Island or in the state of on Long Island or in the state of New York, just it shocked me, and it made me feel like I have to do more and I have to be better informed, right, because that's unacceptable.
Right. No, it's unacceptable. But we all have to play our part, right? So we can say it's unacceptable and not do anything about it, or we can take the opportunity, correct, to educate and empower, make sure that you pair new birthing parents with some mentors, people that have been parents for some time, so they can kind of walk you through this process, looking at the opportunity to introduce birth workers into your birthing journey.
Right.
Because they're a little bit more, let's realize it, like when you go visit the doctor, you're talking to the doctor for about 6 minutes, right? Like it's not a long time. But when you have a midwife or you have a doula, they're a little bit more connected with you. So you may feel more comfortable in sharing with them, right, what your experiences are, so that if you have preeclampsia, you're talking about the pain that's associated with preeclampsia, so therefore it can be addressed earlier and sooner rather than later, mm-hmm, so that it affects your birthing, mm-hmm, outcomes. Mm-hmm. So, and the crazy part for me, like you were saying, just in general, that was astonishing to you, but the crazy part for me was regardless of socioeconomic.
Correct.
So you could be making $200,000-$300,000 a year, and your birth outcomes were the same as somebody that was making $10,000 a year. Right. So that's where that piece of bias, unconscious bias or implicit bias, may come into play, because you're just not listening to Black women like, mm-hmm, you're listening to others.
Correct.
And so that has to be a consciousness on the side of our healthcare providers to be conscious. Listen, we're all born with biases, but the point is to be able to unearth what they are, indeed, so that they don't play out in your everyday service delivery. Right.
And addressing those maybe that are in the shadows. I'll never forget when Executive Ballone came, mm-hmm, to Pronto, mm-hmm, when he was speaking to our immigrant, mm-hmm, community. Mm-hmm. and he chose Pronto to use it as his place to make that message known. And he spoke about so many of our immigrants being in the shadows and not wanting to come out, not asking for that care that you're talking about, perhaps being worried about the fact that they're undocumented and risking deportation or some sort of other status that might impact their children who were born here or what have you. So, addressing those individuals throughout the entire spectrum of our community is critical.
No, it's critical. And there's different levels, right? Like if you're an asylum seeker, it's important to ensure that our community-based organizations that are serving our entire complement of Suffolk County, neighbors understands what those different levels are, because, they may see you as an immigrant and say, I can't help you. But depending on the temporary status that you have, sometimes you can get medical insurance. Sometimes you can get access to services. So it's really important to ensure, and that's what we tried to do from the county perspective, is to make sure that people understood the various levels of legality,
right?
And then so that you could offer services, and that you wouldn't just initially say, I can't provide the service. So you have the opportunity to be able to provide those services, and because you want to provide services to all your community members.
So along that entire journey, talk to me about the support groups, perhaps your sorority and other groups or community-based organizations or support networks, whether formal or informal, that assisted you in making sure they kept you grounded, making sure that you were staying focused and kind of dealing with the stress properly and balancing.
So I don't know if I deal with stress properly, so I'm just going to put that out there. Just saying. But I think, one, the vignettes is helpful in reference to keeping me grounded, right? So I might be dealing with, a variety of different organizations, or I might be dealing with a $3.7 billion budget. But then when I go to teach my students, I'm teaching a 5-year-old, and I ask her, do you have any questions? And she's asking me the question of, why do you have a mustache, right? So it brings you back to some sort of normalcy and reality. But my sorority sisters are always, I belong to Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I pledged in 1987 at Dartmouth. But my sorority sisters keep me grounded. They are the ones who are checking in on you on a consistent basis to make sure you're good. I have a group called the Sisterhood, and they're people that I've known since I was 10 or 11 years old. We check in with each other on a consistent basis and really prioritize self-care. But I think it's also your community-based organizations. It's your churches, right? Your church. My husband belongs to Abyssinian Baptist Church. I still am a member of Our Lady Miraculous Medal, but pretty much went to church with him. So your church family is providing you that support. I have 8 sister-in-laws, so my sister-in-laws check in on me. And when they say you're marrying into a big family, but it's been a blessing for me. I was an only child, and I married into 11 brothers and sisters, so that has been a blessing for me. But you also have to seek out. Sometimes you're always on the go, run, but you have to seek out opportunities that allow you to be able to just release, exhale, and just sometimes allow someone else to provide guidance to you, because you're always providing guidance to others, but they have to kind of impart some knowledge and experience that they have as well. So the Links is a great organization. Jack and Jill of Suffolk County and Nassau County is a great organization focused on our youth. Pronto, me having a conversation with Vivian,
right.
We just may talk from the level of being service providers and say, you know what, this is not working well, or what do you think about this? So the opportunity to really, and also the opportunity to know that you can learn from anyone. Sometimes people think that I have to learn from somebody that has 10 different letters after their name. No, you learn from a 5-year-old, you'll learn from an 85-year-old, you'll learn from someone who may not have a degree, but you have to be open to knowing that should help to influence the work that you're engaged in by engaging in conversation and dialogue with people.
What organization groups or tools did you use to refine your skills along the way? Like, were you involved with Toastmasters or other groups that helped you refine yourself, improve yourself, and develop your skills?
So I'll be honest with you, I really didn't have the time to do that,
right?
Because I'm still working a regular job and then have to run this organization. So really what I did was I just tried to find mentors within my community and within my field to kind of align with.
Okay.
And so I have to say, like, County Executive Ballone's a great mentor.
Right.
Like I could watch how he did something and be like, you know what? He really is collaborative. Like he might come up with an issue and then have all of us in a room and ask us what our thoughts are. Then he's going to meet with each one of us individually to ask us what our thoughts are again, and then bring us all back to ask us what our thoughts. But all that is doing is helping to influence the decision making that he has to make. So I think from there I learned the importance of collaboration and varying voices to influence the decisions and the policies that you're going to implement. You know, for public speaking, I looked at Michelle Obama and how she presents herself. Yeah. You know, I looked at actually poets like Nikki Giovanni and God rest her soul. I know she just passed yesterday, but looking at her and what's their cadence as to how they speak and how do they engage the audience.
Indeed.
And then also looking at like a Martin Luther King and Obama, right? Like how do you engage your audience? Because the thing is, you can have so much information, but if you don't know how to communicate that information and make it real to people, it doesn't matter, and then you're not being of service. Right. So I really I tried to find people within my community and then within my work arena that I could really kind of model and then ask for their mentorship.
So in closing, what advice would you give to my two princesses, right? They're 14, 19, or to our broadcast audience to give them an idea of how to overcome challenges or how to persevere or what to pursue and when? What would be your life coaching kind of advice for our audience today?
So the one thing I will say is compartmentalize things. Right? So if you're having an issue here, compartmentalize it and don't allow it to be overarching with everything that you're going through. And take things one day at a time. Don't start thinking about what's happening 5 months from now or what's happening a month from now, because it may seem overwhelming, especially if you have a lot going on. So if you take one day at a time, compartmentalize things so that, you know, even if something was going on at work, because I compartmentalized it, I didn't bring that home to my home space. So I think that piece is important. I think what I will say for me is don't take on too much. Don't take on too much. You can't, we all are going to do what we can to save the world and ensure that the communities that we live in are better communities, but sometimes I took on too much. And so taking on too much doesn't allow you to be your best you because you're pulled in 10 different directions. So sometimes you have to step back and be a little introspective, but you have to have time to be introspective. So you have to give yourself the time and the grace to say no sometimes. Right. It is very difficult for me to say no. Indeed. It is. But you're not going to be your best self if you're doing 50 million things. You're not going to do them all well. So you do have to pull back and figure out where's your skill set best needed or most needed, and then pour yourself into that versus trying to do so much. Right. I think I've accomplished, what I wanted to, but I also think that, there are also some things that suffered as well. And I think my family life suffered as well. So like I said, the advice that I give to other people is like, don't go too far out, pull it back, and then always take an opportunity. 3 months in, 6 months in, check yourself. Is everything working? If it's not working, then figure out how you're going to do it differently. And I would imagine that strategy helped you avoid burnout. Correct? Yeah. Right. Well, I'm high on life, so I actually really like interacting with people and really doing stuff like that. So the burnout, sometimes your body's just going to tell you. There are times on a Sunday that I'm like, I really can't get up. I'm trying to get up to bed, but I can't. So your body's going to tell you, I got to rest. So... But I think also, too, praying through it all to say, Lord, like, if this is too much that I can bear, please release something. I can't release something. Right. So I need you to help me, or you just release it for me. So trusting and having faith, and then asking him for asking for his help and his assistance, because he will help you. Right. And he'll remove something that's probably a little bit overburdensome. Well, I want to thank you once again. Thank you. You are our chosen family. You are a true champion. You are someone that inspires me. You are someone that I look up to, that I admire, and I appreciate
you in my life, bringing value to me individually, but more importantly to the community at large. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I thank you for bringing me on and allowing me to have this platform. And hopefully something that I've said sparks an interest in someone, or you can take something away from what I've said that's just going to make you a better person. But the one thing that I want to leave everybody with is that we have a commitment to our community. We have a commitment to ensure that we're helping the next generation rise. If you become successful, it means nothing if you're not opening the door for other people.
Right.
So if you can take on that mantra and motto to open doors for others when you've become successful, to allow for more people to be at the table. Because, a lot of people like to talk about, I was the first. Yeah, but you shouldn't be the last.
Correct.
So you should have made sure that you open doors so that there are now no more firsts, and we all have an opportunity to have a seat at the table.
Right. And that there is what personification of those goals are. Vanessa Baird Streeter, our champion in our champion circle today, part of our chosen family. And we want to thank Liga de Justicia Abogados for affording us this opportunity today. We will be airing this on ConexcionLatina.com as well as YouTube. And we will bring more extraordinary and phenomenal guests just like Vanessa to future episodes. So we thank you for your participation today, Vanessa. We thank our audience for listening and hearing about your very candid journey and all of the great tales that you have and all of the turns that perhaps were unanticipated sometimes, but were blessed nonetheless. So thank you for listening, and we sign off from the Champion Circle. Thank you, and have a great day.